Welcome to Out with Dan, the podcast that spotlights and examines the voices of LGBTQ+ authors, characters, and our allies. Together, we lift our voices and we tell our stories. I'm Dan White. Join me as I chat with this week's author. Hello, and welcome back to Out with Dan. Today, I get to talk to actor, performer, artist, and now author Rinny Perkins about Not Everyone is Going to Like You. Thoughts from a former people pleaser. Welcome, Rinny.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm so excited. This book is it's called a manifesto, and I really believe it is. Give us a setup about why this book.
Why this book? Because a girl needed money. That's the case. Well, and then I also have like the book right here. Honestly, I guess it all comes from like one of the things I struggled with the most was being a people pleaser and also just not feeling like seen or heard and wanting a space for like my voice to, I guess, matter. Because for quite some time, I just felt like nobody gives. I don't know if I can curse.
Say whatever you want, Rinny. You're welcome.
Okay, for the longest time, I felt like nobody gave a shit about what I had to say. And, you know, you're just like talking into like this echo chamber. And so I guess like creating this book gave me the opportunity to really, I guess, like stand pretty firmly on validating myself, understanding and asserting and affirming myself that my voice did matter and I did have something to say. And people relate, or maybe it resonates, but I guess I just like utilize this as an opportunity to just kind of like share that.
Well, you know, I love it because I do think it's important. I think in this world, of course, here's Dan with his opinions. I do think in this world that, you know, oftentimes the squeaky wheel gets the oil. The person with the most money or the most power is the one that's heard. And for the rest of us, we are simply as valuable. One person is not more valuable than another. Maybe in our personal lives, maybe you and I value each other more than we value people on the outside. But as far as a humanity, no one's more important than the other. And that's something that I see in your book, that I hear and I recognize. And I celebrate that for you.
Thank you.
So talk about, if you will, a little bit about what I would call mental health and seeing a therapist, and let's bust that myth that there's something wrong with someone if they need to talk to a professional.
Yeah. Well, mental health is something mental health care overall is just something I really am a strong advocate for. Even I mentioned in my book, like how I started going to therapy as a kid. And like, as a kid, like you had the idea that therapy or any kind of like mental health care was like for people that just were like off, for lack of a better word. And that there was like no space for, I guess, like what you consider yourself to be like, you know, it's neurotypical, but like a normal person. And as I, you know, got older and I recognized I'm neurodiverse, you know, ADHD, clinical depression, anxiety, I started to like recognize like that there's no shame in being somebody who is neurodiverse. There's no shame in advocating for your own mental health. There's no shame in getting help. No matter what that help looks like, no matter if it's just going to therapy, no matter if it's seeing a psychiatrist and actually starting medication. Like that's also another, I guess, like journey as well, because like a lot of times people are okay with therapy if they're okay with therapy. But when it comes to the psychiatrist part, when it comes to actually starting mental health care plans that incorporate medication, like there's also a separate stigma, then a whole nother battle, because like even though people are okay, the people that are okay with therapy, like once you start talking about, oh, I have to take antidepressants, or I have to take maybe a anti-anxiety medication, or a medication for attention it's not hyper deficit, it's ADHD.
Yeah.
I'm like trying to like rattle it off, like I know all these. Once you have to take medication for ADHD, like the stigma comes back. Like there's, you know, some of the things I've heard were like, oh, you don't need like those pills, like, and it's just like they're just to help me function and, you know, have the same chance and opportunity and ability as like someone who doesn't have to navigate life with those same like neurodiversities. So I guess it's one of the biggest things that I really want to like highlight and push is like getting people comfortable with advocating for themselves and like really shedding the shame of what it looks like to seek, you know, mental health care. Like I would love to live in a world where like nobody cares if you're on antidepressants, and it's like, oh yeah, it's whatever. But I had no idea, like even an example, like with some of my friends, when I first started talking about antidepressants, I had no idea some of them also were on antidepressants. And it was just like a big revelation, because it's like, oh, we're all like kind of keeping this like on the low, when in actuality it's normal and it's fine and it's accepted and it's nothing people should be ashamed of. So that's one of the things.
Well, I love that. And that's one of the things that you do in your book so eloquently and so lovingly, is that you basically say, this is my journey and this is what I'm dealing with. And let's take it out of the closet. Let's take it off the back burner and put it on the front burner. And let's show that life happens to each of us differently.
Yeah.
You know, I think a lot of times in conversations I've heard people say, oh, well, you know, she's medicated, he's medicated, or whatever. But you know what? Sometimes it's what's needed, because we all have a chemical balance and sometimes it's off balance. I know that depression is something I have to be careful about. If you know me, I talk a lot, I'm very open and happy, but depression happens to everyone and we have to be careful, you know. And some people, careful isn't just enough. Sometimes they need something else. So I celebrate that with you. And it's also one of the things that I see in your book, that Rinny is about handling Rinny's business. And I think I think that's important. So I want to mention a couple of things in your book. So I love the term left on red. So what is left on red?
Okay, so I'm a big advocate for read receipts. Ever since I got an iPhone, I have my read receipts on. I never take them off. I know that is kind of controversial. I don't know why. I love the fact that like I have the ability to like let someone know that I read it and I am choosing not to respond intentionally. But also, if I read it and I don't respond, sometimes it can be an ADHD thing, and I just 2 hours later, maybe days later, like, oh, I got to respond back to them. But yeah, like I just like the idea of letting people know like where I stand. Some people might say that's like passive aggressive. I don't believe so. You know, it's passive aggressive having your read receipts off and then not know whether you read it or not. Like that's passive aggressive.
And by leave on red, you're showing someone that I'm here. I saw it. I also think that, you know, in this day and age of immediacy, I struggle with, because I grew up as a people pleaser and I haven't quite shed it. I'm working on it, but I haven't shed it. So I'll get a text or an email from a work client and I become obsessed mentally with, how long do I have to wait till I respond? And I am an independent contractor. So it turns out that you don't own me 24/7. And none of my clients think they do. But here, I began to think I have a responsibility, and my responsibility is to me first. Would you agree?
100%. 100%. I have this thing about emails and when I'm going to respond to emails, and like just because I'm not in a traditional like 9 to 5 like office space cubicle does not mean that I'm not allotted the boundary of when I'm not working. So that means 5 p.m. or sometimes I try to work like 9 to 4. Or whenever my brain is like, no more. And then that's when I'm just kind of like, I use the work do not disturb setting on my phone. So that basically lets me know like, okay, like this is when I'll be like handling work things. And this is when I'm no longer available. And instead of like feeling bad, like, oh, I didn't respond to this person and they sent me an email at 8 p.m. at night, I just tend to just kind of like, okay, well, I'll get back to it tomorrow. And there should be an understanding and they shouldn't be upset that I'm getting back to them tomorrow because I am only beholden to myself here, unless it's like an emergency. And if it's an emergency, they have my phone number. Business don't have my phone number. That's another thing. I absolutely do not believe in like sharing personal numbers with like clients and things like that. Like we have a Zoom, Skype, like anything else, but like I don't believe that they need access or to be texting me like all times of the night or day, just for work, because then that drives me up a wall. So
it does. So I have a client that I'm very fond of who will send me emails 24/7. And oftentimes with a little note at the bottom, this is so you will remind me. I'm like, are you kidding me? What about not doing that? Because then I feel responsible. I just, so having grown up in a home that I would characterize as an ACA, an adult child of an alcoholic, I believe that with me personally, that's where a lot of my people pleasing came from. Is that an experience with you, or is it something different than that in the people pleasing?
I actually learned this in therapy. So one of the habits of people pleasing that I picked up is really hyper focusing on making myself of use. Because the idea was, if I was so useful to the people in my life, friends, relationships, whatever, they wouldn't dispose of me. And that's what kept me in the cycle of people pleasing. It's just like the act of not wanting to feel disposable. The act of, if someone thinks that, oh, Rinny's doing all these things for me, like there's no way I'm going to like abandon or like counter out or anything like that. But guess what? They do that anyway. It just takes a little bit longer, because once someone is like, oh, I'm only engaging with this person or in community with this person for the benefit of myself. And once they've like reaped all of those benefits, and then I'm left with the feeling of being disposed again. And so that was a little bit what I went through, I think, like coming up, just like feelings of like abandonment and things like that. And really wanting to hyper focus on having like this like picture perfect life that you would see on like television, like nuclear families. I grew up with my grandmother. And so not like having like what I saw television was telling me family was supposed to look like traditionally, really like it really was like a struggle, I think, for me. So I tried all throughout like adolescence until like adulthood, and still, I mean, it's still a battle every day, work in progress,
Yes.
to reject like overextending, performing so much labor just so someone can see value in you, when in actuality it's like, you don't have to convince anyone of your value. Like if you have to convince them,
you're wasting your time.
They either see it.
Yeah, precisely.
Yes.
And I think that sort of circles back to what you were talking about earlier, wanting to be seen. I think that a lot of times people pleasers, we do want to be seen and we want to be heard and we want to be valued. And somewhere in there, we formulate in our mind that if we do enough, they will see, they will respect. And the sad thing is, we're missing our component of it if we don't respect ourselves enough to set boundaries. And until we learn to respect ourselves and to see ourselves and to value ourselves, but setting the boundaries becomes the delicious part of the conversation when we get to that. I just love it. I have a question, though, that I will tell you that this set my world on fire, sister, when you brought up breadcrumbing. Of course, I had no idea what in the hell breadcrumbing was, but I have educated people. So since you educated me, will you educate the audience on what breadcrumbing is?
Okay, yeah. Breadcrumbing is this like really sinister type of communication that is like you're lightly engaging with someone. You're not truly having, you don't truly have like the intentions of like pursuing them seriously, but you engage with them just enough so that you can keep your options open. So like there's a chance you could come back at your convenience. Folks that like breadcrumb, they do things like maybe sending text messages, like, you know, saying hi, but then like ghosting after you respond back. They make loose plans. I'll let you know types, but they don't really commit to truly like seeking to be like in any kind of like relationship or engagement with you or community with you. Because breadcrumbing can be platonic and like romantic. Like, just a matter of like these folks just want to like loosely commit themselves. And also it's just based on like opportunity. Like they feel like there's an opportunity to get something from you. Like they're gonna just like do just enough to keep you on the hook. So that's unfortunately what breadcrumbing is.
Well, I will tell you once again, I thank you so much for that phrase, because I know about ghosting, sort of about orbiting now, but the breadcrumbing thing was, here again, people see a people pleaser. And breadcrumbing is so easy for someone who's not a people pleaser, because they want to make sure you're on the hook. They just aren't going to follow through. They just really want to make sure they've got your attention. So I was like, oh, that has set me free on this day. And as I do know you're from Houston, I do think there should be a second subtitle to Ain't Everybody Gonna Like You. We need a little bit of Southern in this.
Honestly, that should have been the book title.
I love you know, we got to bring a little bit of the South with us, Rinny, wherever we go. Once again, the book is called Not Everyone Is Going to Like You. It's by Rinny Perkins. It is so delicious. Do you have social media or a website you'd like to share?
Yes, I am everywhere online at Rinny. That's RINNY, Riot, RIOT. So yeah, that you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. Be real, I don't really use it, but I'm there.
Well, you know, and so this book is wonderful in so many ways, especially in the message we were talking about, but it also showcases your art, which is something we really didn't get a chance to talk about too much. So I encourage everyone to go to Rinny Riot, RINNYRIOT, and you will find Rinny's artwork as well as her book.
This is true.
Lovely. Thank you so much for joining me, Rinny. Hang on for me just a second.
All right.
Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of Out with Dan. You can find more information about this podcast and its host at OutWithDan.com, on Twitter at OutWithDan, and on Instagram and Facebook at GoOutWithDan. This podcast is hosted by Authors on the Air Global Radio Network, and the theme music is provided by bensound.com. Join us again soon for the next episode of Out with Dan.